Is this the new big three? My Hero Academia and Black Clover had one of the biggest runs in Jump since the original big three, and considering its insane popularity and timing, many would throw Jujutsu Kaisen into the ring as well. And in case you're new to the internet, people try to decide who the new big three are only all the time. Part of this is because the big three are so influential. Another reason is because despite the fact that One Piece is still currently running, it's been a while since Naruto and Bleach ended and a lot has changed. Naturally, there's a lot of debate as to which manga were handed the torch, so to speak. And as you can see, My Hero, Black Clover, and Jujutsu Kaisen are three likely candidates for a new big three. But there's just one problem. Well, there's a couple actually. First of all, the big three is a made-up term. Made up as in it's never been officially recognized by Shueisha and it's more of a fan term. Kinda like when everyone watching The Mandalorian talks about Baby Yoda. It's not really a thing, but everyone knows what you're talking about. That being said, there's another problem. Namely that at least as far as I can tell, nobody knows who actually coined this term. The big three isn't unique to manga, as you can see it used in history, sports, games, but nobody knows who started the whole big three thing in Jump. Which means we don't really have an official definition as far as what makes the big three the big three. I'll put it this way, it's 2024 and even guys like Totally Not Mark, who definitely knows what he's talking about when it comes to anime and manga, doesn't know what the real definition is. So of course I'm going to offer what most fans seem to believe is the real definition. But before that, there's still one last problem. Even in a perfect world where everyone knows the big three and recognizes their impact, there's a common idea that this will never happen again. That there will never be another new big three because the big three just so happen to have come out at the same time and all been popular. And so to try and decide a new big three is pointless because no three manga will ever dominate Jump like those three did. And while that may be true, I think that the idea that there will never be another big three is kind of narrow-minded. True, it is a bit silly to try and arbitrarily decide a new big three, but considering how popular these series are and how often they each come up again and again and again in these kinds of conversations, it's only natural to consider them as the leaders of Jump, so to speak. That being said, I still do recognize that in the modern age there isn't as much of a clear lead like there was back in the day. So even now that all of these series have left Weekly Shonen Jump, we really won't know until years from now. But considering the insane run they've all had, there's more than a few reasons why My Hero, Jujutsu Kaisen, and Black Clover could be the new big three that people have been fighting over for the last decade. Now, before I explain why that is, make sure to like the video if you're enjoying it so far. It's the easiest way to support the channel, and it helps spread the video to other viewers like you. So depending on who you ask, the definition will vary, but what makes Bleach, Naruto, and One Piece the big three will always go something like this. The big three are three manga that debuted in Weekly Shonen Jump at roughly the same time, and with the exception of One Piece, all ended around the same time. Furthermore, these three series drastically led in both sales and popularity. So some examples of manga that don't apply: Dragon Ball doesn't apply because it ended before all of these three series. And that's important to keep in mind because part of why people talk about the big three in a group is because they all took inspiration from Dragon Ball in one way or another. Another manga that isn't in the big three, Hunter x Hunter. This is because although it started around the same time and was also insanely popular, the big three have sold way more. Finally, one last example I'd like to point out is Attack on Titan, which should be obvious because it's not in Jump, yet here we are in 2024. Anyway, now that we have the rough definition, let's talk about why people are starting to seriously consider My Hero, Black Clover, and Jujutsu Kaisen the new big three. First of all, let's talk about the My Hero Black Clover run in the 2010s. Following their debuts, these two manga were consistently at the top of Jump along with One Piece for what felt like an eternity. I mean, up until Black Clover's Spade arc, you could bet that whenever a new release of Jump came out, My Hero and Black Clover were at the front of every manga discussion, whether it be in forums, on Twitter, YouTube, whatever. So much so that for a while, people almost considered these manga to be like the big two of the new generation. and this trend continued when each series got an anime adaptation. Black Clover was of course very popular, and My Hero was so popular that by the end of season 1, everyone was talking about it. And by the time we got season 2, everyone was talking about tournament arcs and debating whether Stain was really the best new villain. Point being, while these two were running, they dominated Jump. And then, of course, when Jujutsu Kaisen debuted in 2018, it was basically an instant success, with it quickly taking over Jump alongside these two manga. All kinds of promotion and, of course, crazy sales. And that's before the anime. Obviously, as we all know, ever since season 1 came out, Jujutsu Kaisen has been one of the most discussed manga alongside One Piece. The anime is still one of the most popular series. It's the most popular anime of the season whenever it comes out, and MAPPA became one of the most popular studios as a result of its success. So, fully recognizing that it's still pretty early, if there were to be a new Big 3, the Big 2 of the 2010s would have to be in there. And Jujutsu Kaisen would definitely have to be in there purely because of how it's dominated the community for the last 5+ years. But OG, I'm sure you're all thinking, what about Demon Slayer? Funny enough, I tweeted about this a while back, and when I did, I knew Demon Slayer fans who haven't said shit for like the last year were gonna come out of the weeds. And what do you know? There's a whole bunch of people saying, oh, but what about Demon Slayer? As a matter of fact, a lot of people specifically mentioned that Black Clover should be replaced with Demon Slayer. And at first, that makes perfect sense. The Demon Slayer anime is way more popular than Black Clover's anime. Black Clover has had one movie that did well, but Demon Slayer has had a bunch of movies that have all sold a boatload of tickets. Plus, Demon Slayer has also sold more volumes, which if we're going by what most people would agree made the original Big 3, then by definition we should actually replace Demon Slayer with Black Clover. But because there is no official definition, we're not really tied to sales as the one and only metric. Plus, when you view it in the broader scheme of the industry, there's more to it. For example, Demon Slayer's run wasn't nearly as long as any of these other manga. Demon Slayer debuted in 2016 and ended in 2020, ending after 4 years. The only one that comes close is JJK, but by the time Jujutsu Kaisen is over, it will have had more than a 6-year run, and nobody questions whether Demon Slayer is over that series. So when we look at Black Clover and Demon Slayer, the reason I'm hesitant to replace Black Clover is because of its unique position in Shonen Jump. Black Clover started in 2015 and ran in Weekly Shonen Jump for over 8 years before moving to Jump Giga in 2023. It may not have had the insane spike in sales and popularity that Demon Slayer had, but Demon Slayer hasn't had the same kind of longevity. Black Clover has had its ups and downs, but there's still tons of manga fans reading new chapters. There's still anime fans. And even though the arcs can be somewhat hit or miss, the whole Spade arc hype train took place well after Black Clover had debuted. Demon Slayer is a different story. Demon Slayer did okay at first. As a matter of fact, its sales were roughly the same as Black Clover's prior to their respective anime. And then, of course, the two split when Demon Slayer spikes in sales. But here's where the debate is. So Demon Slayer obviously sells way more, but when we look at popularity, not in terms of sales, but in terms of reception of the story, there is a big difference. Because although Black Clover was hit or miss for a while, once you hit the time skip, it reaches one of the biggest hype trains it's ever seen, and that's more than halfway through the story. Demon Slayer, on the other hand, hits somewhat of a decline after Entertainment District arc. Most people will agree that the series peaks after that arc, because after this you have the Blacksmith Village arc, which in all honesty is kinda just okay. Certainly not as good as Entertainment District. Then you have Hashira Training, which is an okay arc. You do get the final arc where there's a big comeback, and a lot of people will say there's some of the series' best fights and character moments. But then you get the fight with Muzan, and it's probably the worst fight in the entire series. And because of this, even longtime fans naturally put a bit of distance between themselves and the manga. Now, granted, Black Clover hit a wall too prior to its next hiatus, but my point is this. Demon Slayer had a much bigger peak, but it did peak, and it only ran for 4 years. Black Clover didn't have this kind of insane spike, but it's managed to outlast Demon Slayer, and it's still loved by fans. My point being that although Black Clover may not have had such a trending impact on the magazine, the reality is that it's been around for much longer, has a more dedicated fan base, and as a result, will likely have had a longer lasting impact on the industry when we look back in the next 3 to 5 years. Now, that being said, there's still room for debate. The fact that there's no official definition proves that. On the one hand, Demon Slayer sales are insane. On the other hand, Black Clover can go on hiatus for like 2 or 3 years, then get a movie, and still have that movie go trending worldwide on Netflix. So who gets that third spot is obviously a point of contention. As a matter of fact, you could even argue it should really be a Big Four, but I hesitate to start down that road only because it kinda defeats the purpose of having a Big Three. The whole reason there's even a Big Three is because there just so happened to be 3 manga dominating Jump at the same time. Nobody decided it was gonna be 3, just like nobody's gonna decide it'll be 3 or 4 or 10 this time. On that note, you can even argue that there isn't a Big Three due to the fact that we have to talk about it. Bleach, Naruto, and One Piece were the Big Three. Nobody, well, okay, almost nobody, debates that. The fact that we even have to have these debates could be argued as proof that, as big as these 3 series are, it's still way too early to talk about the next Big Three. But now I'd like to hear what you think. Who do you think should be in the next Big Three? Is there even a new Big Three? Share your thoughts and see what everyone else has to say down in the comments. I'll pick my favorite and share it as comment of the week on my community tab. And if you'd like another discussion like this one, then check out my video on One Piece. In that video, I analyze One Piece's artistic evolution. You can find that video in the playlist linked right here. Until then, thank you for watching, and I hope to hear from you soon.